Welcome to another episode of Mystic-Skeptic Radio. On our on today's show, we have Michael B from, how do you pronounce your Instagram page?
The Word Cartographer.
Okay, so we're gonna play two videos, one from Katie Halper, speaking about Yiddish, and then the other one from this lady that I can't stand, who comes up on progressive groups. So I want to get your opinion.
Okay.
Okay, so it's interesting. Like, she just said that matter of fact, but didn't give any evidence. And then this is the other lady.
Seen that video.
Okay, so tell us about the work that you do in your reels, and then we can go step by step describing what these people are saying and if there's any evidence for their claims.
Yeah, so I've run a few linguistic pages for a couple of years now, mostly just for fun, but it's been a fun outlet for just I studied linguistics and a lot of languages in university, and it's been kind of an outlet to sort of keep up with a lot of those topics and talk about things I find interesting. But a lot of those are Hebrew topics. I've done a few videos on certain myths about Hebrew in general, and specifically with modern Hebrew. But yeah.
So Katie Halper is correct. Nobody cared about Hebrew at all, even Middle Eastern Jews, and Yiddish was destroyed by the Israelis to try to create this fake narrative.
So Yiddish has mostly declined in the last century because of assimilation and because, well, the Holocaust, because a lot of those speech communities are just don't exist anymore. That's the real reason. Um, the the old issue, well, not the old issue, but the Zionist community in Ottoman and Mandatory Palestine didn't generally have the most positive views of Yiddish, but there's some exaggerations about how much they actually tried to restrict. I mean, there were definitely fanatics in the language wars uh, in pre-state Israel, but no, the government never really officially banned Yiddish. Some people, some activists tried to disrupt Yiddish publications and Yiddish theater, etc. But no, the language would have pretty much died out. It's only really maintained in ultra-Orthodox communities. Really, in general, even in the States, it's pretty much only restricted to certain Orthodox communities. But no, that's not why Yiddish died out. It's mostly because of, well, the Holocaust.
And then Ms. Roselback, who very um, like aggressively claims that Hebrew was forced upon the population of I guess historic Palestine, and then it was somehow um, like a mixture of a bunch of different languages because nobody knew biblical Hebrew, and then she contradicts herself at the end that the Yemenites do speak some type of version of that. What do you think about her claim?
So, the Jewish community in Ottoman Palestine, I mean, it's hard to get certain exact demographics, but it was a pretty, the bulk of the community was of Sephardi origin, and they were primarily Ladino speaking well into the 20th century. There were some Arabized communities, and Arabic was definitely the lingua franca, but it was a mix of Ladino-speaking communities, Arabized communities, Yiddish-speaking communities, Bukharan Jews, Yemenite Jews. It was a pretty diverse community. It wasn't like a singular Arabic-speaking Middle Eastern Jewish community, like some of those narratives say. There's a Netflix series called The Beauty Queen of Jerusalem. There's some little historical nitpicky things about it, but that is pretty much what happens. It follows a Sephardi family in Jerusalem from the Ottoman period up until the 1970s. Um, and as they shift from Ladino to statehood to Hebrew, it's pretty interesting. But that is basically what happened. Most of the opposition to speaking Hebrew as a common daily language mostly came from Ashkenazi Haredi communities, not so much from the Sephardi and Mizrahi world. It's more complicated than that. Hebrew definitely had its place, and it was already being used as somewhat of a lingua franca between Jewish groups. That's how Eliezer ben Yehuda got the original ideas. The story goes he was in Algeria, and he communicated with a local Jew in Algiers in sort of ad hoc Hebrew when they didn't have a common language between them. And that's sort of what started the idea of making Hebrew the common language of a future Jewish state or just a Jewish Esperanto, I guess. But which it already kind of had been, especially in writing, since pretty much ever. I mean, most major Jewish works in the Middle Ages, even if sometimes they were written originally in Arabic, they were always translated to Hebrew and known in their Hebrew editions. Like, a lot of Maimonides' works, a lot of works from medieval Spain. And it had always been a language of correspondence. Rashi wrote even though his first language would have been medieval French, he wrote all his Torah commentaries in Hebrew because that was the universal language of Jewish study and it was widely known. But sorry.
In my Jewish studies courses, they would say that the reason that Jews were able to do mercantile transactions among different parts of the world is because they had Hebrew as the common language. Is that a romanticized version of the facts, or is it
No,
true
not
they
at
were
all.
speaking Hebrew to each other, or is it just written?
Well, see, it's kind of complicated because, like, Latin had a similar status and still has, in the Catholic world, even where priests from completely different backgrounds can communicate in Latin. Maybe not perfectly on a conversational level, a lot of improvising, but I mean the vocabulary and grammar structures were always all there, and people did do that. And supposedly, Christopher Columbus brought a converso translator who knew Hebrew and Arabic, with the assumption that when they got to the other side of the Indies, they would encounter other Jewish communities who knew Hebrew or Arabic. So yeah, that's not romanticized at all.
There was a show on PBS that claimed that all languages had a common like basis. They were using Aleph is like the head of a cow, and then if you look at the Chaldeans and the Babylonians, and they went as far as Thailand and even China, they would take the same letter and flip it and play around with it. Have you ever heard that theory that there was like a basic, almost like a Paleo Hebrew at one point, and then it developed into all the different languages?
Yeah, I don't think many people think of either Hebrew or any other language as like the universal first language, like a Tower of Babel situation. I mean, Hebrew is one particular little branch of the Canaanite languages in the Semitic family, but the writing systems of most of the world, and maybe not specifically the Hebrew, Phoenician, Paleo Hebrew alphabet, still is because that became the Greek alphabet or the Etruscan alphabet and the Latin alphabet. So, I mean, even the English alphabet now is a variant, very long divorced um, relative of the old Phoenician Paleo Hebrew alphabet. But yeah.
So when you say that there is a connection, is it from the Babylonians? Is it from the Egyptians? Like, how far back can you go to like a basic language that everybody originated from,
Linguistic, like speaking the same language.
or same alphabet?
Oh, the same alphabet. The Greeks got their letters from the Phoenicians. There were a couple of other scripts Greeks used, like Linear B, in Crete, for example, but that would have been the Phoenicians, probably. A little rusty on the dates, probably like 1200 BC, 1000 BC, around then. So the Greeks would have gotten the Paleo Hebrew slash Phoenician alphabet around 3000 years ago. Then they spread that to Italy, and that became the Etruscan and later Latin alphabets.
So your Instagram page, what is the focus? And it's been so long since I contacted you. There was something that you said about history or politics or something that was very poignant, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show.
Which specifically?
Well,
Was the Hebrew gutturals video, I think, was what you.
what is your focus? What are you trying to convey with your specific Instagram page?
Well, it was just kind of talking about just any topics I felt like at the time. I mean, I love reading and talking about linguistics still, so it's just an outlet for that. I don't know if there's a specific to teach. I mean, maybe I don't like doing debunking content. I've done about a dozen or so videos like that, but there is a lot of really crazy, especially on TikTok in particular, a lot of really crazy misinformation that goes beyond just, goofing up some facts. But some very like neo-Nazi adjacent stuff, and there's a lot of myths about Hebrew, like sort of the ones we watched earlier, that have really taken off that might have small grains of truth, but are really exaggerated or framed really incorrectly for political reasons. But I do hope to correct some of those, and I think I've helped a little bit in certain spaces online. But I mean, yeah, there's some really crazy nonsense in social media these days.
Well, some of your hits are that the King of England didn't speak English. Is English occultic? Um,
Yeah.
did you ever do one about how some people say that British Israelism is true because Brit means covenant in Hebrew, and then they start
Oh,
finding stupid stuff like that?
I would. I haven't seen that one as much. I feel like that was abandoned a lot. You see more of the Black Hebrew Israelite stuff more than the British Israelite stuff. I mean, it would be interesting to go over. I don't haven't really seen that many people say that recently. But that one I feel like is so obviously kind of wrong that it's just maybe not even worth touching. But then again, so are a lot of other things that people say online. So we'll see. That would be an interesting topic.
But as you know, we're getting older, we're starting to see how history, objective facts, and context don't really matter anymore. It's more about like almost like a gotcha thing where
Yeah.
everything on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, it's like, let me prove these people wrong with a bunch of factoids and don't even look it up. Just believe me. So are you having a hard time like expressing historical truth when you're dealing with people who don't really care for it?
Not really. Most of the people I've responded to directly, with a few exceptions, I thought were being really, really malicious. Like, I think the video you contacted me about over that one, that guy's just a straight up neo-Nazi. Like, I mean, he just paints pictures of Hitler just casually, and um, I was scrolling. I couldn't help myself. I try not to get sucked into that, but no, I try to be as factual as I can, and specific as I can. Most of the time, I've responded to a video is because one, again, they were being really, really malicious, just top to bottom, or they had a video that popped off really big, and I really hate some of those pseudo-linguistic ideas and pseudo-historical and pseudoscience. I tried to get into the debunking flat Earth kind of stuff a little while back, but there are some better creators who do that better than I do, so I'll just stick with the linguistic and historical stuff, I guess. But yeah, there's some wild. It's made me a little nervous sometimes because I haven't gotten any like serious backlash, because there's not much they can really say. I mean, that sounds a little arrogant, but like I don't hit that record button lightly. So if I'm gonna come at something to debunk it, I'm gonna make like sure I'm right. But had some mild issues with trolls and harassment, but nothing as serious as I've seen other people go through. But
Can you describe how was the guy that paints pictures of Hitler deconstructing Judaism or attacking Hebrew or something?
yeah, he was just attacking Hebrew. But reason I responded, he's not a huge creator, but that video had like tens and tens of thousands of likes, and he was I forget exactly. It's been a while since I've rewatched it, but he's like talking about how Germanic languages don't have gutturals when that's kind of something they're famous for. All the ch and r, all the rolled in the back of the throat R's, and the phlegm sounds, as he would put it. It's just stupid, but I don't know. Just there's a lot of wild stuff. Part of it is just it's so easy to make content now, especially the way TikTok and Instagram are set up now. I mean, you can pretty much just say anything with an authoritative tone and come off like you know what you're talking about. But and it's getting something wrong is not like the end of the world. But some of these just I've seen so much wild stuff. I mean, the conspiracy theories, especially on TikTok, because of the way the algorithm works. So many people in certain echo chambers will see something and then they'll snowball it in a certain part of the internet, and it's I've come onto some really crazy comment sections. It's really it's made me a little depressed in the last year or two, to be honest.
Tell us about the Ten Commandments in New Mexico.
Oh yeah, that one. The Las Lunas stone is it's a forgery of the Ten Commandments that was found in New Mexico. Um, we're not really sure who did it. It might have been the guy who supposedly found it. It might have been some overzealous Mormons in the area or someone just playing a prank. A lot of people believe it though. There's a lot of like hoaxes and claims about ancient Hebrews or ancient Phoenicians visiting the New World. And well, it's not like literally impossible. Some wayward Phoenician sailor made it over here. There wasn't some huge population migration or anything like that, and there's no other evidence of, Semitic languages having any connection to any languages in the Americas. But yeah, that's a hoax a lot of people really believe, but there's a lot of spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes in that stone. And it's pretty obviously a forgery, but a lot of people cling to it. There's a few other like the Bat Creek stone. I haven't gone into that one. I should probably do that in a video, but um, it's been because for years, the LDS Church or some elements at least, have you know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mormonism, but all the stuff about Jesus and the Hebrews visiting the Americas and stuff. Some of that seems to have crossed into and merged with other conspiracy theories, and so especially like the Black Hebrew Israelite stuff, they seem to have adopted that even that like ancient Egypt was actually in Arizona, or like this crazy stuff. And there's a lot of stuff about the Grand Canyon. There's some sensationalist piece, I think it was in the 20s, that someone wrote about some cave in the Grand Canyon that had all these Egyptian artifacts, even though no one else ever saw it. And some people, just 100 years, they cling to it. It's a very, I guess, romantic idea to think about ancient Hebrews in the Americas, but there's no evidence that that's true.
Are you familiar with how the Nazis de-Judaized Jesus and made him into the son of Odin or some type of Viking god?
Not so much. I've heard a little bit about that, but there's the movement online to sort of, de-Judaize, Jesus, and Jesus wasn't a Jew; he was a Nazarene, or some crazy stuff that's just amazing mental gymnastics that makes no sense.
But
But that
it's scary because the Germans were very intellectual and very knowledgeable, and they came to the point where it was like sophistry, where they could find like a weird thing and then build a case from it. So what I've read is that they said that Jesus was Ashkenazi because he was from northern ancient Israel, and that he wasn't a real Jew. And it's like, well, Ashkenazi means European Jew. So
yeah.
they just went with that. And then, but they also had crazy ideas that the Hindus were their original ancestors, and that, I don't, that's where they got the word Aryan from. So they were mixing like Tibetan stuff and like all kinds of different things all together, but it caught on. And that's why it was so scary when Kanye West was pushing the Black Hebrew Israelite stuff, because it very quickly became very popular.
Yeah, it's mixed with some elements of Nazism, and it's kind of wild to again see all the various like pseudoscience and conspiracy theories kind of meld into weird to the point. There's one I have a troll page where I sometimes like follow some of those like neo-Nazi accounts just to like keep tabs on them. One of them has the whole as well, Hitler wasn't racist because he was nice to Jesse Owens, and Nazism was actually inclusive of black people, and it's just bizarre like historically illiterate nonsense. But there's some people, even some I've seen some African Americans like interact with that page, and it's pretty wild. It's wild. Um, and a lot of that is spreading unchecked on social media, and there's not that many people talking about it. And it's a little scary.
So tell us about your background, what got you interested in languages, and what has been your journey in that field?
Um, I always was, even in high school. Even just studying like Hebrew and Spanish when I was younger. I don't know, it's been a lifelong kind of pursuit. It's something I always want to get better at, whether it's just speaking or knowing a lot about languages. Yeah, it's just a lifelong hobby. I don't know, I can't not read about it or study about it.
You do it
But
professionally, or is it just a hobby?
uh, so I've had most of my I work almost full time as a musician now, but most of my normal jobs were doing Portuguese or Spanish translation. So I did use it professionally to a point, just not linguistics specifically, because I'd probably have to teach or go into academia. But I mean, it's always an option to go back to. I've thought about going back to school for a while, but um, the more strictly linguistic side rather than the speaking side is more of a hobby, I guess.
And do you have any insights on how Spanish and Portuguese spread throughout the Americas? We've been seeing a rise of people that speak Mayan coming through the border, and it's amazing that they've been able to keep their languages alive because growing up in Mexico, the Mesoamericans were discussed, but once Columbus or Cortez came, the indigenous people were treated like they didn't exist, and we were never allowed to learn about them, to celebrate their culture or even their language. And now people are coming out of the jungles and the mountains that still speak some of their languages, and slowly they're being brought back. But for 500 years, they were completely oppressed and treated like they were unimportant, and the Spanish and Portuguese was the way to survive or to assimilate. Um, any things you've seen or that are interesting from that? What happened historically?
More so with Portuguese. I'm more familiar with Brazil's history than the rest of Spanish-speaking Latin America. But it's really interesting. Portugal didn't really start heavily mandating Portuguese as a language until the end of the 1700s, only like two or three generations before Brazil became independent. Before that, they spoke what were called línguas gerais, general languages, which were sort of standardized forms of Tupi. And everyone learned it because even some Portuguese chroniclers said if they used Portuguese in Brazil, they would be talking to themselves because even among African slaves and various indigenous tribes, everyone learned these sort of standardized forms of Tupi that had Portuguese influence. But um, that kind of came to an end in the late 1700s. And then Portuguese became more official and mandated. And then we start to see what you were just talking about, where you had to absolutely to get anywhere in life. And there's still some indigenous languages in Brazil, but they've hugely declined. I think only like maybe 1% of the population can speak an indigenous language. And a lot of them are in very remote areas of the Amazon. Um, but yeah, Spanish. It's also spread in Spain like that too. Because what's interesting is that Spanish was sometimes more widely spoken in some parts of Latin America than in Spain itself, because Spain has many regional languages like Catalan, Galician, uh, Basque, which wasn't always as heavily mandated until the beginning of the 18th century. But for a while, there were some urban parts of Latin America that were more Spanish speaking than some parts of Spain were, um, specifically. But yeah, and there were a fair number of conversos and undercover Sephardi Jews in the earliest generations of the colonization of the Americas. And there's still a little bit of Ladino. Also, I think they mentioned Ladino in one of those videos we watched earlier, um, which Ladino in Israel is and in Turkey is hugely declined. Uh, I've met a few speakers, but it is heavily declined because of the exposure to more standard Spanish and assimilation into Turkish and Hebrew speaking and in English speaking in the United States society.
So I attend and participate in the Society for Crypto-Judaic Studies,
Hmm.
and a lot of the conversos they speak kind of like non-educated Spanish. So it's like a pig Spanish, and they were thinking that it was Ladino, but then they realized that it was actually like Castilian Spanish, that it was like in a lower form, and that it had no connection to Ladino because Ladino was mostly in the Mediterranean. So
Yeah.
so that's the latest on the Ladino among conversos in Latin America and Southwest US.
Yeah, I have to look into that more. Yeah, I'm mostly familiar with Ladino in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, but that's really interesting. There are a lot of archaisms still. Even in like northern New Mexico Spanish, it's still very archaic and have a lot of older features that were present in older Spanish. I meant to do a video on that. It's still on my topic list. So I haven't gotten around to that, but
Well, I wanted to ask you, what is the issue with the U.S. being so xenophobic about other languages, and how come they feel so threatened by Spanish speakers and stuff like that? Like, if everywhere else, the more languages you speak, the more culture you are, and here it's unpatriotic to be interested in other languages.
it's a broad topic. Well, I mean, a lot of it is just straight xenophobia. I mean, it's not even necessarily so much, I think, about English as being English or having necessarily pride in English literature or, the history of the English language. It's mostly about xenophobia when it's expressed like that. Um, and it's kind of funny because I rarely meet people, even growing up in Tennessee, that had no interest whatsoever in learning another language. Some people don't, but when it comes usually to dealing with immigrants, then it's a different level. It's one of those something that's classy when you're rich, but kind of trashy when you're poor, I guess, mentalities. But it's still out there a lot. I mean, it's become maybe less PC, especially with the internet and someone chastising someone in public will probably get canceled and end up on the internet. But I mean, it's still out there, and I think it was just straight up xenophobia. It's kind of the difference, a little bit of a difference in British colonization versus Spanish or Portuguese colonization. And just wanting a more uniform society and not having a lot of respect for the Catholic.
Have you ever heard about the indigenous president of Mexico, Benito Juarez?
Benito Juarez, yes, he was the first indigenous one, right? It's
So, but
1860s.
but he didn't consider himself indigenous.
Oh yeah.
He was so assimilated by the Jesuit priests that raised him that he
Yeah.
actually went into native communities and told them to behave, to become Spanish, and
Hmm.
for them to be fully assimilated. And then my friend, who's native Canadian, said that the French had this idea where you can either become nativized, like have your own tribe and have a treaty with them, or you can become French and be fully assimilated to the culture, but you would lose all your indigenous rights. And I always feel that Mexico was trying to emulate the French colonists in that idea that if we're going to have a true democracy, everybody has to be under the same language, the same culture, the same mentality, and it wiped out all native like possibilities. And there was some issues that Benito Juarez was dealing with, such as every town had different laws. So people would duke out their troubles by killing each other, and that wasn't working for the Mexican early Mexican community. Have you looked into Native American languages and how those 5,000 nations have dissipated through colonialism as well?
Not as much as I would like. There's just so many. It's hard. I've studied Yaqui, which is originally from Sonora in the northwest in Mexico. A little bit dabbled in Navajo, but a lot of people have. But it's really Yaqui is the only one I actually tried to study with any like actual depth. But um, yeah, it's one of the problems is that well, Navajo's done a lot better than some because one, there's just more speakers, they have more territory, more resources, I think, more than some smaller, because a lot of smaller ones, especially in Oklahoma, have gone extinct even in the last few years because even COVID did its toll on some really elderly speakers during the pandemic. But a lot of them will go extinct in the next few years. It's really sad. It's really unfortunate.
And
And some aren't. Sorry.
what would you like for people to learn or take away from this conversation regarding the importance of languages?
That, well, they're important. That seems like a simple sentence, but even languages that aren't major global languages or viewed as important are still worth preserving and learning, especially if they're attached to your family heritage. Uh, no language is necessarily or really better or worse than another. They're all just forms of human expression. Uh, you know, humans form languages. It's a reflection of their culture and identity and life, and it's worth preserving. It's worth learning about.
Have you heard about the latest research on monkeys and other animals being able to communicate?
I was just talking to a colleague or friend about this. Yeah, it's a broad topic. Because you have to go species to species to species, and there's millions and millions of species in the world, if not tens of millions. But yeah, some one of the problems is the difference between, all animals can communicate, but is it really language? Dogs can communicate, territory and aggression and submissiveness, but they can't understand literature or intangible things necessarily. I mean, they feel them, but they can't communicate it. Whereas, Coco the gorilla could look at, something and just she learned sign language and signal that she was sad, which is, an intangible feeling that she could communicate. So it varies wildly across species. But I mean, a lot of animals do have proto language or some early form of language, and it's kind of an insight to beginning of human language, but especially with primates. But yeah, it's something I've meant to do a video on it because generally I feel like the linguistic community would say like animals don't. Maybe a few have proto language, but most animals don't have what we would specifically define as language, even if they communicate. But that's a fascinating topic. And really goes deep into our own psyches of why we even speak or communicate the way we do.
And is it true that they're banning Arabic in Israel, or there's some proposition to do that?
No, a few years ago, it was removed. It used to be an official language. It was Hebrew and Arabic. Now it got downgraded to a special status, is what they're calling it. No, it's not banned. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, you could probably, maybe in some parts of the country, like it's kind of hard to explain because Arabic is literally everywhere. If you go there, it's on virtually every sign. There are Arabic speakers everywhere. Much more in the north than in say like the central part of the country. But no, no, no one's banning it. Not that I've heard of. I mean, there's a certain amount of prejudice in some parts of the country against it, just in general, and some racist prejudice against it. But I don't. No, they're not banning it, I don't think. Maybe some extremists on the right wing would try to, but no, they're not banning it.
So there was an Israeli guy that was speaking at a conference, and he was saying that when Israelis would learn about Arabic culture, language, and history, they would be more understanding. Do you do you agree with that? That part of the xenophobia or fear of the other comes from not being aware of where their ideas come from?
Well, it's an interesting thing is about half or more of the Israeli population, well, one third of all Hebrew speakers are Palestinian Arabs, and then of the 75 to 80% of Israelis who are Jewish, about half of those have full or partial family origins in the Arabic speaking world, Moroccan Jews, Yemeni Jews, Iraqi Jews, or some mix like thereof. And a lot of their families did, and that was one of the more heavy-handed things. It was highly discouraged, especially in the early days of mass immigration to the state during the 50s, to not speak Arabic. Don't, and they did come down pretty hard on some groups of immigrants for speaking Arabic. I don't think it was ever outright legally banned, but it was very, very highly discouraged, especially in a lot of early immigrant camps and transit camps. But so it's interesting that, yeah, a lot of the population did actually come from Arabic speaking origins in the first place, but um, a lot of Israelis do learn Arabic in school, but not super well usually, unless they've worked in some sort of security background or military background that necessitated that. There's a ton of slang that most Israelis learn, but I think it would be helpful to make Arabic, a full-on required subject. I think it might technically be, but a lot of people can opt out of it. Um, but yeah, it would be more helpful to study Arabic literature, learn the language and alphabet, and it is it would help a lot with xenophobia and a lot of certain sentiments that exist in society.
So we're gonna get hate letters for this question, but when they said that there was Israeli operatives in Iran, wouldn't they be very quickly able to find them, either because of their accent, their chutzpah, or their were they Iranians that defected? Like, what could be a way that I know there's a story about in Egypt there was some Egyptian Jews that were causing trouble at one point. Um,
Levant affair, yeah.
isn't it pretty clear or easy to spot people at times, or everybody just looks the same? They just are from a different religion or culture.
Well, the thing about Iran is that there was a pretty strong wave of immigration after statehood in the 50s, even well before the Islamic regime came to power. But then there was a big exodus after, where I think almost 100,000 Jews left since 79, 80. But the thing is that and this was a huge asset for Israeli intelligence throughout the last few decades, is that there are lots of people who don't have accents, that they really do. Like, one of the things that I remember reading a story during the 73 war, one of the radio operators, they instantly knew Iraqis were coming during one part of the war, and they could even identify what specific region of Iraq, because so that radio operator was from the same region, originally in Iraq. And there's so many, fluent Persian and Arabic speakers, especially from specific backgrounds, that you know, Eli Cohen, I don't know if you're familiar with his story. I mean, he was a Syrian Arabic speaker. He grew up in Egypt, but both of his parents were Syrian, and he blended in perfectly. No one could even guess that well, he was Syrian. No one could ever guess that he was actually a spy. And with Persian speakers, I mean, a lot of I know a lot of more recent immigrants who from Persian speaking backgrounds, Jews, who left in the 90s or 2000s. There's some here in Nashville. And they're not really distinguishable from most Persian speakers. I think the only thing would be keeping up with, more current slang or cultural reference. But I mean, yeah, I can totally believe that they had plenty of agents in country that wouldn't be detected.
And doesn't that add to the conspiracies that the Jews are everywhere and you can spot them and they're every color and every in every part of society?
I mean, well, from that perspective, yeah. I mean, from an intelligence perspective, I mean, being such a multilingual community, I think it's easy to do. At least in Iran or a lot of parts of the Arabic speaking world. But, um, I mean, if they want to look at it that way, but I mean, that's just a conspiracy, though.
So I was just watching this young lady who very well described how passing as white gets you in the door, but then once people find out you're from a different religion or a different community, then you become a target or a scapegoat. Have you experienced any of that, or any of your friends felt that having European features is only good like when you enter the door, but once people find out about your background, your last name, then it becomes an impediment or a reason to be like what's the word? Not trusted.
Uh, Me personally, not really. I mean, especially in the South, though, there is that thing of, there's not a huge Jewish community necessarily. Atlanta and South Florida, well, but yeah, that might look similar, but we're not you. And there are some reactions that I haven't seen them as much or heard. I've heard of a few things here and there, but yeah, that is something I feel that's growing. And some people are getting more bolder. I don't know if you read that story about someone who turned down a job application or a job offer because the business owner was Jewish and was pretty blunt and rude about it. It's very emboldening in the last few years, which that I couldn't imagine that even 10 years ago, hardly, at least not at this scale. But um, maybe in an American context wider, because there's a historical context, anti-Irish, anti-Italian sentiments, and anti-Jewish sentiments as well, in a lot of the same periods in the late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe still to a point to this day, but um, yeah, there is that sort of passing when it's okay, but not really being part of the club. In some ways, that does exist still.
For our audience in Nashville, where the show was broadcast, were you in Nashville when the guy went into the Jewish Community Center wearing a fake beard in a Halloween costume, trying to pretend to be a rabbi?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, I was here. I've been here for a lot of incidents, like the conservative synagogue on West End, getting a drive-by. There was a few bomb threats in the 90s to the same synagogue. I mean, most holidays there's a series of threats coming from either like Islamist types, not Muslims in general, but very specific organizations, whether they're real or just claiming to be to cause fear and white supremacist types. I mean, it's a pretty common occurrence here to get those sort of threats or messages or emails, calls. Yeah, I remember that it was a little scary. I've been to that community center more than a few times. It's weird reading about something and it's, here and it could happen here. Um, Yeah, it's very, it's hard to put into words. It's just like because you read about so many things in the world and then it happens here in a community that's usually relatively quiet. But
So we left Nat Tennessee in 2016, and then 6 months later, that guy blows up in a van at BB King's, and I went there with my wife one time for a date, and it was so sad to hear that that area was. Um, I don't think too many people were injured, but just to know that you passed by there, kind
you
of
mean the
gives.
Christmas bombing, the whole
Yeah.
ATT thing? Oh yeah, I woke me up. I wasn't all that far from it. I thought it was just like a transformer or lightning or thunder or something. But yeah, that's pretty wild. They just recently fully reopened that street. It's been closed down ever since. Just a few months ago, I think they reopened it. But a lot of the damage is still there, and it looks almost like a war zone still to a bit to a point. But yeah, it's weird seeing that close to home.
Well, 10 years later, there's still, leftovers from it. But well, we want to thank you for your time. I know that there's a lot of topics to discuss.
Oh yeah.
We've had multiple Instagram influencers on the show that they're giving their perspective on what's going on in the Middle East, what's happening in the current culture. Is there something, as your final question, that worries you about where this country's heading, where the world is heading? Do you feel like people are less disconnected and more reactive? Do you feel that people are more apathetic and careless? As a young person, what are the things that keep you up at night?
Be honest, a lot of we touched on it earlier, but a lot of the kind of crazier sides of social media has made me more concerned than I have been in the last few years, especially the post October 7th world. Because I mean, it's weird when you see things that are just, objectively have nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict, and that are just, a lot of people aren't educated enough to actually know the difference between, hey, this is just actual regurgitated Nazi propaganda that has nothing to do with the Middle East. And then having an acquaintance or someone you're friends with on Facebook like it, and it's just like, oh, or leave like certain types of comments. I don't like Dan Balzerian is running for office in Florida, which is bizarre beyond I can't even put into words how bizarre it is. But him just saying the crazy stuff he does, then having people like or agree with it is publicly is kind of concerning. And it's not so much about the more logical parts of society. There's a lot of not so bright people, especially in this country, unfortunately, and a lot of them are very gullible to certain, reactionary to certain things, and yeah, it does kind of bother me that some of this is seeped into circles of people I know, and you just walk around like, hey, does this person even I don't know if you've noticed, but even in the gym world and fitness world, it's become um, being outright anti-Jewish has become almost a meme in some parts of the gym world. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar, like Kenny KO, who was a big gym influencer. He just straight up became a neo-Nazi. It's not even hyperbolic. Like, he just straight up sells like swastika t-shirts and stuff in his merch store. But there are a lot of people like kind of like him or adjacent to that in the gym world, and even going to the gym in the last like 6 months or so, it's kind of like got me looking around as like, is it you? Is it you? Is it you? And it's bizarre. I never thought I would
Well,
you know
look,
see
if
that.
if you have a few more minutes, I wanted to get your perspective. So, uh, I think one of the reasons that the Nazis were so influential is because they're very good at creating a narrative of strength. And
Mhm.
Nietzsche said that Christianity was silly because it was all about sacrifice and forgiveness, which he saw as like feminine. But the real wusses were the Jews because they gave us that mentality. So then he
Yeah.
was able to say, well, if you don't want to be like the Jews, be like us, and we're gonna be like the new Vikings and the new neo-pagans with tolerating some of the Christian stuff, but we're gonna transform Christianity into this higher, you know, Uber Mensch kind of mentality. And that's
Hmm.
what these idiots are doing. If you look at Nick Fuentes and Balzerian and all those guys, uh, even the guy that just got arrested, they have this like macho thing going, and it's all misogynist and hateful, and it's building up this type of, you know, we're not gonna let anybody mess with us, and the weirdest thing is that some Jews have joined because they want to make it like the battle of civilizations, and that
Yeah.
the only way that they can keep the Muslims out or whatever is by being with the strong. and that's how the churches fell into the Nazi propaganda back in Germany. So, do you see some of the connections?
I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of it really is just straight up regurgitated Nazi propaganda that, most of us who paid attention in school, got through in middle school, literally. I mean, I'm convinced a lot of them can't read, like past the middle school level. Like, I'm being completely serious. Like, they can't. The number of times I've seen someone post like a green screen overlay of something that directly disproves what they're talking about because they didn't read the entire page or read it in context is just mind-boggling. But yeah, it's a community thing. I mean, I think it does tie into directly what you said. I mean, it's wild how that's taken off in those a lot of those gym and fitness niches on the internet. But yes, it's alarming, and it's an overly macho world.
And we have Trump, who's the grease pig that can get away with anything, and he can say all kinds of stupid stuff. And then he does dog whistles for people who are supremacist or xenophobic. So he kind of emboldened them. Uh, how do you feel about that?
Well, we're talking about Dan Balzerian. I feel like he's kind of Trump light because he's obviously much, much more stupid than Trump is, but at the same time, he says the dumbest things, and there's still hundreds of thousands, at least, of people who agree with that, even though he's literally, I mean, the dude is literally a overgrown trust fund baby. I mean, all his dad was a huge scammer and criminal, and he basically hid money in plain sight by giving Dan, hundreds of millions of dollars, and his entire career was pretending to be a poker player and paying women to hang out with him. Like he's nothing of value whatsoever, and still he has a following, and it's sort of that same playbook. And I don't I don't know. He could get to that same point at this point. I thought it was kind of a joke, but I mean, people thought the first Trump presidency was a joke until he actually won, or a lot of people did. And it's kind of the same playbook. It's the same thing. And some of those candidates, really scare me.
Well, maybe next time we can have you on, we can go deeper into how I actually like when Nazis are honest and they're out in the open versus the
Yeah.
ones that pretend not to be, like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and stuff like that, where
Oh
they
yeah.
use euphemisms for the Jews, even Alex Jones, the globalists, and they never come out straight and they just say what they really feel.
Yeah, I've done a few videos on Candace. I'm quite familiar with that. But yeah, I agree.
Okay, brother. Well, thank you so much for being on. This will
Yeah,
be
for sure.
playing sometime in October, November. We're recording for the next season, but we appreciate you, and hopefully we can stay in touch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you.